The late afternoon light filtered through the trees of Central Heights Park in soft gold beams. Warm but fading, children's laughter echoed in the distance, blending with the rustle of wind through brittle leaves. Somewhere nearby, a fountain gurgled lazily and tires screeched faintly at the far edge of the city's breadth. On a wrought iron bench near the western path, Thomas Grant sat perfectly still, his hand resting gently on a cane, the other curled over his knee. He wore a tailored charcoal coat, his hair carefully combed back. Even blind, he maintained the posture of a man who once held the eyes of boardrooms, who had once stepped on OTED stages and made investors lean forward. But now, his sightless eyes pale, slightly clouded faced the soft blur of dusk, empty. The world, once alive with code, numbers, and brilliance, had narrowed into a routine of steps, voices, and obligation. Judith had brought him here again, like every week. She guided him to the same bench, with the same quiet urgency and perfectly controlled affection. She'd smoothed the seat, adjusted his collar, told him, "Just a few calls, darling," and then walked off, her heels ticking against the path like a metronome of distance. She never stayed long, 15 minutes, sometimes 20, always out of reach, always within earshot. Thomas didn't mind the silence. At least, that's what he told himself. Lately, he told himself a lot of things. He sat with his face tilted upward, letting the sun warm the skin beneath his eyes. He imagined the light used to look like this, dappled through leaves, flecked with amber, but now, even light was a ghost. And then he heard it, so quiet it might have been the breeze speaking. "I can heal your eyes, sir." The words fell into the still air like a pebble dropped into deep water, gentle, precise, impossible to ignore. Thomas blinked, slowly turning his head toward the voice. He hadn't heard footsteps. No one had approached. He had long since memorized the sounds of this park's skate wheels clacking, dogs barking, the distant ring of bikes, but this voice had arrived from nowhere, softly, as though it had always been there and simply chose this moment to speak. "Pardon?" he asked. His voice graveled from disuse. "I can heal your eyes," the voice repeated, clearer now. Young, female, still oddly calm. No laughter, no teasing, just certainty. A quiet laugh escaped Thomas's lips. "You can't even imagine what's been tried," he said. "Surgeries, implants, labs. I built a company that spent years on this problem. None of it worked." "I know," she replied, "but I'm not talking about machines." Her voice came from his left now, close enough he could hear her breathing. Had she sat beside him? He hadn't heard the bench shift. Her presence unsettled him, not because she frightened him, but because she had waited. She had hidden until Judith's heels were gone from earshot. She had been watching, listening. "Why would you say something like that?" he asked, wary now, suddenly aware of how fragile his world had become. There was a pause. "Because I heard her," the girl said quietly, "the woman who brings you here. I think she's your wife." Thomas's spine stiffened. "I live near here," she continued. "Sometimes I sleep behind the coffee shop when it rains. I see you to every week." She always walks away to talk, but this time, I heard her say, "He's finally blind. Almost time." The words sliced through the fading light, cruel and sharp. Thomas felt as though the ground beneath him shifted an inch. "You must be mistaken," he said, but it came out flat and certain even to his own ears. "I'm not," the girl said simply. Silence swelled between them, the full now to be ignored. Thomas's fingers trembled slightly against the bench rail. His throat was dry. He wanted to ask 100 questions, but none came out. "I didn't mean to listen," she added, more softly now. "I just had to wait until it was safe to tell you." "Safe?" he echoed. "She scares me." The girl stood. He heard the whisper of her shoes against the stone path. "I'll be here tomorrow, same time," she said, and then she was gone, vanished, like a shadow into the trees. He didn't move, even when Judith's familiar perfume drifted back toward him, even when her hand slid into his and her voice chirped, "Time to go, darling." His body rose automatically, as it always had, but his mind stayed behind with the girl, with her whisper, with the flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time, the terrifying possibility that someone still saw him, and maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone. The next morning, Judith's voice was sugar-laced again, overly gentle, like syrup hiding poison. "Thomas, love, would you like jasmine or white rose tea today?" He tilted his head slightly. "Whichever you think is best." "White rose," she purred, for clarity. The irony twisted like a blade in his chest. She led him out the door, her grip slightly tighter than usual as they walked toward the waiting car. He felt it now. Not guidance, but control, like a leash wrapped in silk. And he realized something he hadn't noticed before. Judith only touched him when others might be watching. The car stopped near Central Heights Park, as always. Judith helped him out, adjusted his scarf, kissed his cheek, quick, clinical, like pressing a seal onto an envelope she intended to discard. "I'll be near the West Fountain," she whispered. 15 minutes, but this time, she lingered longer. He could feel her eyes on him as he settled onto the bench. Only when a soft breeze rustled the trees and the faint click of her heels faded into the distance did he sense he was alone, or almost alone. "Hi again," came the voice. He didn't jump, though his body stiffened slightly. It was the girl. Jada, same soft tone, same unsettling calm. "I didn't scare you this time," she added. Thomas tilted his head. "Not exactly. You don't speak like a child." "I watch. I remember. Grown-ups forget what that means." He smiled faintly. "You said something yesterday I haven't been able to forget." "I know." There was silence between them, the kind that hums with meaning. Then she sat beside him, quietly, like she belonged there, like she'd done it 100 times. "I heard her again this morning," Jada said. "Your fiancée." Thomas turned slowly. "What did she say?" Jada didn't answer right away. Instead, she took something from her coat pocket, a smooth stone, wrapped in worn red cord. She pressed it into his hand. "This is from my aunt. She used to say it helps protect what's true. Keep it in your pocket. Don't take it out in front of her." "Why?" "Because Judith watches everything." A chill licked the back of Thomas's neck. "You're certain that's her name?" "Yes," Jada replied. "I heard her call the driver McGill yesterday." "Same man who dropped you off." Thomas ran his thumb over the stone. "Cool. Heavy. Real. What else did you hear?" Jada hesitated. "She talks to someone on the phone. Not often, but when she does, she walks fast. Gets nervous. Once, she said, just stay quiet until the doctor signs it. Then the papers will be ready." The words struck harder than he expected. Thomas kept his voice calm. "Do you know what paper she meant?" She said it's almost time, just like before. Then something like he won't resist much longer. Like she was waiting for something to happen to you. Thomas swallowed, hard. The pain in his gut wasn't fear. It was recognition. Like a puzzle piece sliding into place. "She's preparing for something legal," he muttered. "She wants control. I think she wants everything." Silence stretched between them again, heavier this time. Jada reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "I wrote this last night," she said, after I saw her talking to that tall man with the tan coat. "He gave her something. She didn't know I saw it." Thomas opened the page slowly. He couldn't see the handwriting, but he could feel the lines pressed deep into the paper. Angry lines, rushed, urgent. "She's going to make people think you're losing your mind," Jada said softly. "She's setting it up." "How do you know?" "Because I used to live with someone who did that to my aunt. They made her feel small. Said she was tired, confused. They took everything before anyone noticed." Thomas's breath caught. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, quietly, "You're not just here by accident, are you?" Jada looked down. "No." She stood. "She's coming back. I'll go." "But," Thomas started. Jada placed a hand lightly on his arm. "Just listen," she said. Not to her words, to what's missing between them. Then she was gone. Judith's voice appeared almost immediately, like a cloud drifting back to block the sun. "Everything all right, darling?" she asked, too casually. "You looked deep in thought." "I was just listening," Thomas replied, evenly. "To what?" He turned his face toward her, forcing a soft smile. To the silence. She laughed lightly, as if he'd made a joke, but her fingers tensed on his shoulder for half a second, just enough for him to feel it, just enough to confirm it. Jada had lit a match, and now he was ready to follow the smoke. It rained that morning softly at first, then with a persistent drizzle that coated the city in a glistening hush. From the penthouse windows, Thomas Grant couldn't see the fog rolling in over downtown Houston, but he could feel it pressing against the glass, hear the low moan of wind threading through the balcony doors. A scent of wet stone and distant magnolias lingered, almost nostalgic, like something from another lifetime. Judith moved around the apartment with her usual elegance, her heels muffled on carpet. Her voice sugar-laced and measured. She kissed his cheek lightly, the way someone might touch a statue for luck, and said, "We can skip the park today, darling. It's too damp. Let's stay in." "No," Thomas said. His voice was firmer than he expected, and maybe louder. She paused, just enough for him to notice. "I'd like to go," he added. He didn't explain why. He couldn't have. Not without revealing that something inside him had shifted, not just since yesterday, but across the past week, since the girl in the park whispered the impossible, since he started questioning the silence, since doubt had stopped knocking and instead made itself a bed in the back of his mind. Jada said nothing, only retrieved her umbrella and guided him to the elevator with a soft, practiced grace. In the car, she was quieter than usual. No idle talk about her meetings, no updates about the board, just the click-click of her nails against her phone screen, messages typed, deleted, retyped. He listened to everything now, every sigh, every pause, every tone. At the park, she led him to the bench like always, brushed off the dampness, and handed him his cane. "Don't stay long," she murmured. "I'll be over there." Her heels clicked into the distance, swallowed by the hush of wet stone. Thomas had a long moment, breathing in the damp air, fingers curling around the cane. His palms still throbbed faintly from where he gripped it too tightly last night. He had barely slept. His mind had played the girl's voice on repeat, like a song both haunting and unfinished. "You're finally blind. Almost time." A lie, a child's game, or the truth he had been too proud to see. He didn't want to sit today. He wanted to move, to feel the ground, to remind himself that he was still here, still able. Slowly, Thomas rose to his feet. The path stretched forward in dim blurs of rain-slicked stone. His cane tapped cautiously. One measured sweep after another. Puddles gurgled beneath his shoes. Tree limbs hissed overhead in the breeze. A child laughed in the distance. A dog barked. Then quiet again. He took another step, then another, and then he misstepped. His cane struck an uneven groove in the stoner roots well he hadn't memorized. His foot caught the dip. His weight shifted, and the world, once predictable, quiet, steady, tilted sideways. His body slammed against the ground. Hard. Pain exploded in his wrist. Sharp and white. His hip hit next, thudding against the step's cold edge. The air in his lungs vanished in a gasp he didn't have time to swallow. Everything was soundless for a moment. No breath, no movement, only pain. And then, "Mr. Grant," the voice, urgent, small, close. Jada. Her hands were on him, fast but careful, one on his shoulder, one on his arm. "Don't move," she said, her breath quick. "I saw you fall. I was already coming. I saw. I'm fine," he muttered, teeth clenched. "No," she said, "you're not. Your hand's bleeding. Your wrist, it looks bad." He tried to sit up. She helped him gently, like someone who had done this before. Maybe too many times. Maybe for someone she had once loved and lost. He leaned back against the old stone monument, breath still ragged, pain blooming in his side. "I didn't see the drop," he whispered. "You didn't see anything," Jada replied, not cruelly, just truthfully. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You're too honest for your age. You're too proud for yours." The words stopped him, not because they stung, but because they were true. She pulled a folded cloth from her coat, clean but worn, and pressed it gently against his bleeding palm. "We need to clean this. You may need stitches." He nodded faintly, still breathless. "I can call someone," she offered, but her voice dropped lower. "She's coming." Thomas turned his head. "Judith." I heard her voice. "She's close." And sure enough, a moment later, the sharp staccato of heels rang out on the wet path. "Thomas." "Oh my God, what happened?" Jada vanished behind a bench with the swiftness of a shadow. Gone. Silent. Thomas straightened, wincing. "I tripped. Misjudged the edge." Judith knelt beside him, breath tight, voice fluttering. "You shouldn't have walked alone. I told you this path isn't safe." "I needed to move," he said, more coldly than he meant to. "We're going home," she said, already taking control. "This is too much. I should have hired someone by now." She helped him to his feet. Her touch was firm, almost possessive. He said nothing, not when she tightened the grip on his arm, not when she muttered under her breath to call Dr. Sandler, not when she said, "We'll talk options." Options. He knew what that meant now. When they reached the car, he asked only one thing. Not the clinic. He said, "Take me home." Judith hesitated, then nodded, but her voice was clipped. Eyes sharp though he couldn't see them. Back at the penthouse, she made calls fast, quiet, private. He sat in his study alone, the pain in his wrist throbbing in time with his heart. He reached into the drawer and pulled out the recorder, pressed the button. "This is Thomas Grant," he whispered. "If I am declared unfit mentally or physically, I want this on record. I have not lost my mind. I may be bruised, but I have not surrendered. I am not alone. There is a girl named Jada. She is real. She knows, and I believe her." He clicked it off and placed it deep in the drawer. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out the stone Jada had given him days earlier. Cold, textured, wrapped in cord. It didn't shine, but it was solid. Something to hold, something to believe. The fall had hurt, but what came next was the rise. The sky over Houston cracked open that morning with thunder so low it made the windows of Thomas Grant's penthouse hum. The rain hadn't come yet, but the air carried weight, the kind that warned of storms you couldn't outrun. He stood by the tall window in silence, fingers tracing the faint groove of the St. Lucie medal around his neck. The ribbon Jada had tied to it the day before swayed gently from the chain, like a whisper waiting to become a roar. The house was too quiet. Judith had left early, said she had a board meeting. She hadn't kissed him goodbye this time. Good. He didn't want illusions anymore. By the time the car pulled up to Central Heights Park, Thomas's mind was a tide of thoughts and half-formed plans. Miguel opened the door for him, silent as ever. But Thomas noticed something new in the young man's voice, something respectful, like he wasn't just escorting an invalid anymore, like he saw a man rising again. Thomas walked with his cane, but more from memory than necessity. His steps were slower than they'd once been, but steadier than they'd been in months. He reached the bench at the west side of the park. Jada was already there, but she wasn't alone. Sitting beside her was a man, mid-40s maybe, grizzled, voice, thick boots that left faint muddy prints near the bench. His presence was heavy, even in silence. He didn't speak until Thomas sat. "You're Thomas Grant," the man said simply. "I am. She told me you might not believe me. Try me." The man exhaled, not tired, but haunted. "I'm not a cop, not a priest. I don't fix people. I find things." Thomas turned his head slightly. "A detective. Worse," the man said. "I used to work for people like your fiancée." The silence that followed could have cracked stone. Thomas sat still, hands on his cane. "Go on." "I used to dig for leverage, secrets, hidden transfers. People would pay to ruin others before they got ruined first. I got out. Too late, maybe, but I got out. And Judith," the man's voice dropped, "2 years ago, she approached my former firm, asked for intel on your board, said she needed contingency planning in case you became unfit, asked about private account structures, psychological manipulation, power of attorney clauses." Sound familiar? Thomas's hands clenched over the cane. She was planning this for 2 years? The man, Walker, as he introduced himself, nodded. "She's been laying the groundwork slowly, quietly, offshore transfers, false medication reports. She's got a lawyer, Carl Ramsey, ex-corporate fraud, shady, but clean on paper. He's been helping her build a narrative. Thomas Grant, deteriorating mentally, unfit to manage his own life." Jada's voice entered gently, and now she's close to filing. "I heard her on the phone. She said, 'Just give me 2 more weeks.'" Thomas felt his pulse in his jaw. Everything made sense now. The sudden shifts in his prescriptions, the way Judith's voice always smoothed over hard truths, how her kisses had turned from warmth to habit. "What's her endgame?" he asked. "Control," Walker said. "Your company, your name, your foundation funds, the estate, everything." Thomas nodded slowly, like a man absorbing the blow after the punch has landed. He wasn't shocked, not fully, just disappointed that he'd seen none of it until a child in thrift store shoes lit the path. "I'd have proof," Walker added. "Documents, audio, financial trails, some leaked from Ramsey's paralegal, some I got through contacts. But you'll need more than evidence." Thomas turned. "What do I need?" "A lawyer who's not afraid of blood." Jada slid a card into Thomas's hand. "Naomi Price," she said. "Walker trusts her. I checked too. She fights hard." Thomas held the card like it was made of glass. "Why are you helping me?" he asked the man. Walker didn't answer immediately. Then, "Because I owe the universe. And because he nodded toward Jada, believes in you. That kind of faith. Rare. I needed to see why. Thomas swallowed hard. All right. What happens next? Walker leaned in. You play the part. Keep taking her to the park. Let her believe you're still drifting, still passive. Meanwhile, we build our case. Well, you need to start documenting everything. Every conversation, every shift, every pill. I've already begun, Thomas said quietly. I'd have recordings. Hidden. Good, Walker replied. Because the more calm she seems, the closer she is to striking. He stood, but before walking away, he added, watch the nurse, Jennifer. She's not who she says she is. Then he vanished down the path, boots echoing like thunder before the storm. Jada remained. Thomas turned toward her, voice thick with something between awe and grief. How did you know how to find him? I asked questions. She said simply, people trust kids. They don't see us coming. He laughed, then quickly stopped. It hurt too much. Not the ribs. The realization. You shouldn't have to do this, he said. You're a child, and you shouldn't have to fight alone, she replied. They sat in silence, the drizzle turning to mist around them. A squirrel chattered in the trees, a bus sighed in the distance. You're not just my eyes, Thomas said slowly. You're my reminder. She turned. Of what? That I'm still in here. Jada smiled. Then let's keep him alive. They stood, slowly, and walked back toward the gate. Two shadows under a dim sky. One carrying the wounds of trust betrayed. The other carrying the light to expose it all. The storm wasn't coming. It had already begun. The world had changed, though few would have noticed. To outsiders, Thomas Grant still moved with the same slow caution, still wore the same charcoal coats, still let his fiancée guide him by the elbow with gentle, practiced hands. He still sat on the same bench in Central Heights Park, nodded politely when Judith said she'd return in 15, and faced the same fountain he hadn't seen in 2 years. But beneath the surface, beneath the layers of silence and softness, something had caught fire. Thomas wasn't surviving anymore. He was preparing for war. Judith didn't know. Not yet. She hadn't noticed the change in his shoulders, how they no longer sagged under the weight of helplessness, or how his fingers, once still and patient, now drummed against the cane like a ticking metronome counting down to revelation. He'd begun the morning with something simple, dressing himself, not just pulling on a shirt, but choosing which one. Navy with subtle lines, one he hadn't worn since before the accident. It took longer. He'd fumbled the buttons, swapped mismatched shoes, but he did it. Then he opened the old drawer in his study. The recorder lay there, next to the empty pill cup, his silent twin. It had captured every conversation for the last 5 days. Jennifer's voice, Judith's murmured late-night calls, the offer of facility options, and last night's golden moment. You don't need the burden of your company, darling. Let me handle it. Rest. Just sign this. She'd smiled when she said it. He could hear it in her voice. He could feel the rehearsed softness, the practiced lullaby of deception. That recording was now labeled T-Talk. He placed it carefully inside the folder Walker had sent, tucked it between offshore bank screenshots and falsified psychiatric reports, all of it destined for one person now. Naomi Price. She wasn't what Thomas had expected. No leather briefcase, no polished marble office. She worked out of a townhouse squeezed between a florist and a bail bondsman. The brass plate on her desk was tarnished, her bookshelf overstuffed with mismatched binders and war stories. But her eyes, sharp, fast, dangerous, she read every page in silence, played every recording, didn't flinch when Thomas recited dates, figures, names, only nodded, slowly, the way a surgeon examines an x-ray before saying, we'll need to cut deep. This wasn't spontaneous, she said at last. She planned your fall, not the stumble. Maybe, but your fall from power. She's been setting the stage for over a year. She started when I lost my vision, Thomas murmured. When I stopped looking people in the eyes. Naomi tapped her pen. She didn't expect you to find someone who could see without sight. Jada, he said softly. She's more than anyone thinks. I want her to give a recorded statement, Naomi said. Nothing risky, just voice, clear memory, dates. She's credible, and when kids speak truth, judges listen harder. I'll ask her, Thomas said, but I won't force her. Naomi nodded. Good, because the moment this becomes about revenge, we lose. This is about truth, integrity, and survival. She stood and handed him a second envelope. your declaration for the board. I want you to memorize it, not read it, speak it. What happens if they believe her? He asked quietly. If I fumble? If they think I'm just a confused old man losing his grip? Naomi's reply was quick. Then they'll never believe in anyone again. Because if you, the man who built their empire, can be erased with a smile and a lie, they're all vulnerable. Thomas closed his fingers around the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have, but it was the weight of truth. On his way home, he had Miguel take the long route, not for delay, but for clarity. The city passed in a blur of noise and motion, a ghost of the empire he helped shape. As buildings and streetlights slid by, he pressed the envelope to his chest and whispered, I'm not fainting. Not today. Back at the estate, Jada was already waiting. She stood near the marble fountain, notebook in hand, wearing a windbreaker 3 sizes too big and a look of practiced patience. He approached with his cane, slower than usual, not from pain, from choice. You look different, she said. I am, he replied. She nodded. Walker said you got the lawyer now. She's good. She dangerous, very. Then you're ready. He smiled faintly. We're ready. They walked inside. Judith wasn't home, or perhaps she was hiding in another room, watching. Either way, Thomas didn't care. The house, once a mausoleum of muted rugs and cold surfaces, now felt different. Not warmer, but less hers. Jada followed him to the study, climbed onto the corner armchair, and swung her feet silently as he opened the folder. I need you to give a statement, he said. Already wrote it, she replied, tapping her notebook. He blinked. You did. I knew this was coming. She passed him the handwritten pages. Childlike penmanship, sharp words. She said he wouldn't see it coming. She laughed. I didn't. I was scared. Not for me, for him, for what it feels like to not be seen, and then finally seen, and then tricked by the one who smiled the most. He read the rest in silence. I won't let her touch you, he said at last. You already didn't, she replied. The next morning, Thomas walked into his private office and began preparing his voice. He spoke into the recorder for hours, reciting the declaration, rewriting it in his head. He wanted every word to cut through doubt like a scalpel. No hesitations, no weakness. That night, Judith returned, late, wine on her breath, perfume to sweet. She smiled. You've been quiet lately, she said. He smiled back, resting. She reached across the table and touched his hand. We'll talk tomorrow. I'd have something important to discuss. So do I, he said. She blinked, but the silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was strategic. Later, alone in his study, Thomas pressed record one last time. This is Thomas Grant. Tomorrow I speak before the board. If I lose everything. Title, company, name. But if I win, I take it all back. Not for revenge, but because truth deserves its own seat at the table. This isn't just about business. This is about voice. He paused, and I found mine again. The file was labeled Declaration. The storm was circling, and this time, Thomas wasn't hiding beneath it. He was about to walk straight into its eye. The boardroom hadn't changed in years. Same polished oval table. Same panoramic windows framing the Houston skyline. Same curated walls of framed patents and press clippings. The same silence before a storm. But this time, Thomas Grant wasn't the one bracing for it. He was the storm. 12 board members filled the seats. Men and women who had once cheered his IPO, toasted his vision, watched him rise from scrappy entrepreneur to tech titan. Some looked at him with sympathy, some with doubt, one or two with something colder, fear. And at the far end of the table, with her legs elegantly crossed and her smile a weapon of silk, sat Judith Hale. Her eyes found Thomas instantly, cool, unflinching. She wore white, ironic, and had Carl Ramsey beside her, expression coiled, ready to strike. Judith's entire posture radiated confidence. She believed this was her moment, that she had him cornered, that his blindness had become submission. But Thomas didn't flinch. He rose from his seat without help. No cane, no hesitation. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice low, steady, sharpened by nights of pain and practice. Thank you for allowing me to speak before you today. I'll be brief, because the truth doesn't need decoration. He paused. For months, you've seen less of me, heard little. I disappeared not because I was broken, but because I was being erased. Slowly, strategically, and by the person I trusted most. He turned his head toward Judith. Her smile didn't waver. Judith Hale has spent the last 18 months building a silent coup, Thomas continued. Not with stock, not with votes, but with whispers. She changed my medications. She recorded moments of confusion she helped create. She prepared legal documents with a fraudulent psychiatric report, crafted by her private doctor, declaring me incompetent. Also, she could quietly seize control of the company I built. Objection, Ramsey snapped. This isn't a courtroom, Naomi Price countered smoothly. It's a boardroom, and Mr. Grant is a shareholder and founder. He speaks, Judith's smile cracked, just a hair. Thomas pressed on. What she didn't count on was a little girl. He reached into his pocket and placed the St. Lucie medal on the table, its ribbon unfolding like a flag. Her name is Jada, 11 years old, unhoused, brilliant, brave. She saw what I couldn't. She heard what no one else would, and she reminded me that blindness is not the absence of vision, it's the absence of truth. He placed a voice recorder beside the medal and hit play. Judith's voice filled the room, sultry and poised. Once the board thinks he's no longer capable, I'll handle everything. They won't ask questions. He can't even follow his own senses anymore. The board went still. Another clip. Just give me 2 more weeks. He's finally blind. Almost time. Another. Of course he's confused. The pills make him drowsy. I told you he's not resisting. Yet, when Thomas clicked the recorder off, the only sound was the faint buzz of an air vent overhead. One of the board members, an older man named Lewis, who had been with Thomas since the first patent, leaned forward. These recordings, they're recent. Naomi handed him the timeline. Corroborated, dated, matched with bank records and internal emails. Judith finally spoke. Her voice was calm, almost amused. Really, Thomas, you're trusting the word of a child, a homeless child, against mine. Thomas didn't blink. That child is more loyal than you've ever been. Judith stood, knocking back her chair. You've lost your mind. You're sick. You're paranoid. This is pathetic. Thomas's voice dropped, but it carried through the room like thunder. No, this is me, finally speaking again. He turned back to the board. I asked for a vote, not out of desperation, but because if this company stands for anything beyond quarterly reports, if it still values integrity, transparency, and the people who built it, then you'll see the truth, not just about her, but about who I am, even now. He sat. The room held its breath. The chairwoman, a sharp, shrewd woman named Eleanor Cho, looked around the table. We'll take a recess. Vote privately. Decision in 48 hours. Judith didn't look at him as she left, but she didn't smile again either. Back at the estate, Thomas sat in the garden, not the study, not the boardroom, but the place where Jada had first placed the stone in his hand and said, "You're still in there." He waited. And 2 days later, the call came. Naomi's voice was crisp. 6-5. You win. Thomas exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath for years. There, removing Judith from all company roles, freezing her private accounts pending audit. Carl's being investigated for professional misconduct. Any fallout? Naomi hesitated. There will be. The press knows. She'll try to spin it. Play the victim. But we're ready, and there's something else. What? She left. Thomas blinked. What do you mean? Gone. No forwarding address. No message. She cleared out her things. He nodded. Good. Let the ghost walk away for once. Later that week, Thomas stood in front of a crowd of families and children at the newly launched Light We Carry Foundation. The community center buzzed with energy. Jada stood beside him, dressed in a second-hand jacket with a name tag that read Program Director, Junior. Thomas adjusted the microphone. I once thought silence was strength, that to endure was to win, but I was wrong. True strength is found in voice, in the courage to stand, and in the people who see us, not for what we've lost, but for what we can still build. He turned to Jada. She saved me, he said simply. So I built this place to help her save others. Thunderous applause. Jada stepped forward, flushed but fearless. I don't know everything, she said, gripping the mic tight. But I know this. If one small voice can stop a lie, then every voice matters. And if one blind man can see the truth, then none of us are ever really powerless. Tears welled in more eyes than one. That night, in his study, Thomas made one final recording. This is Thomas Grant, not the billionaire, not the blind man, just the man who found his way back. And to anyone listening, if they silence you, if they tell you to sit down, if they try to dim your light, stand, speak, and carry it forward. He clicked the button-off dot behind him. Jada entered quietly, carrying a ribbon-wrapped folder. "It's your speech," she said, "the one they'll read at the foundation gala." Thomas took it, held it, and smiled, not for victory, but for legacy. The storm had passed, but the light carried on.